Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks to the two boards of trades for having me here today. As you heard, I've worked in Toronto for 21 years. I worked for the mayor of St. Louis for 6, and I worked on the good side of the Potomac River, Maryland, not the lawless land over in Virginia where all the defense contractors are, where we did a lot of transportation work. So, and now in Calgary. So I'm going to be using examples from these areas. Unfortunately, we had some problem with the video for the sound, so my humor is not going to be in the presentation. But maybe I'll try and do my best Christopher Walken imitation when it comes up. So I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground here today, talk about what happens through different experiences, particularly Kansas City, who just opened up their light rail, and I think you'll find it informative. So, you had light rail out here a long, long time ago, and it was in fact in 200 cities across North America. And what happened, do you all know the story about General Motors and Firestone tires? Did you ever see the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That's what happened. They bought up all the streetcar systems, tore them all out, and then did what? Sold them GM buses with Firestone tires, for which they were fined $2,500. And of course, now what we see is all across America, North America, we're spending billions to put transit systems back in. So you're not alone. So this video, unfortunately, won't play. It's the same guy who narrated all the videos in the 1940s. It's really great, but I'll send you a link. You can watch it on YouTube. So I just wanted to do some stats about Mississauga and Brampton when I get started here, and talk about who's commuting by car as a driver, car as a passenger, public transit, they walked, that's pretty low, bicycle, you gotta have good eyesight, and other, there's actually more than, well, a little more than bicycle. And so what you're looking at here is an opportunity to improve some of these modes of how people get to work. And certainly when you look at the Huron-Ontario corridor, the opportunity really does exist. So, what's the role of the streetcar? Support local business, encourage growth along the corridor. It's pretty much all the things you've heard. And the thing is, it actually does work. Who rides them? And I want to come back in the next slide to all-purpose riders. One of the things, when you look at transit systems in a lot of places, in the morning, the vehicles are loaded going in one direction and not in the other. So you want to try and create a double flow, and you want that flow to be happening all the time. So it's not just during the peak periods in the morning and the evening rush hour. And so when you look at all-purpose riders, currently across North America, 49% of the people use transit to get to work, 21% use for shopping trips, 17% are recreational, and in the multiple purposes in the off-peak hours, you're trying to drive these two factors so that you have a greater utilization. And in fact, this is what really interests the businesses. And when is the parking lots the busiest at retail stores? On Saturdays. And a lot of this experience is also true with transit. Don't do what we did when we opened up our last rail line in Calgary. This is a light rail line leaving the downtown in Calgary. And the one thing you can't do after you put in the light rail in these areas is go back and rezone them for greater density. Because now the people living in the single-family homes have their transit system, and they don't want anybody else there. And it becomes a big, big difficulty. And I'll get back on this subject because there's lots of opportunity in your corridor to bring a lot more people in. And it's too hard to do after you've built it. So, transportation and demographics. This is actually really funny. And that's Christopher Walken on Saturday Night Live, and he's being interviewed for the census. And he's saying, we're interviewing for the census, you didn't fill out your form, how many people live in your condo unit? And Christopher Walken goes, geez, 80. And the other guy goes, 80 people live in this apartment? He says, seems high, how about 4? And it's actually very funny. But when you start to think about it, and the demographics, the next few slides of what I'm about to show you is what is really important when it comes to building your transit system. So let's look at a couple of things. The 15 most populous cities in Canada. There's Mississauga, sitting behind Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Ottawa, Edmonton, Mississauga, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Brampton. You're right up there, but the next few slides are really telling. When you look at the population growth in Canada, between 2006 and 11, and then the last 5 years, you're averaging in about 5.5%. Mississauga, you were doing quite well in the 5 years leading up to 2011, but it's dropped off quite a bit since then. But look at Brampton. It's like busting the ceilings. It's really, really growing. And when you start to think about that growth, you have to think about the age groups, okay? And who's coming in. And this is important for transit and so many other things. So, population, the percent of your population aged 0 to 14, look at Brampton. Calgary, Mississauga is sort of middle of the pack. That's a good base because these kids are going to fill the schools that you built and hopefully be paying for all of us as we get older. And this is the thing that scares Canada. This is the thing that terrifies Germany. This is the thing that terrifies China, which is why they changed their one-child policy. The growth in the population over the age of 65. And there's Mississauga, 14% growth recently. Brampton's not doing too bad with Calgary down here at 11. But when you look at what happens over time, the numbers shoot through the roof. So Canada, Mississauga, Brampton, age groups, 0 to 14, Mississauga's not doing well. 15 to 24, wow, look at Brampton. It's really something else. These are the kids that are finishing school and will be going into the workforce. But look at this, 65 and over. It's also a very serious thing for Brampton because you have an aging population. I'll be there soon. And I'm not insulting older people, but you don't pay as much taxes when you're older as you did when you were working. And so that's a challenge for the country, it's a challenge for cities, it's also a challenge for mobility. Because you don't want me driving a car when I'm 77. Particularly in the kind of environment we have here. You need to provide options for people to age in the same place. And if you have a transit system, it means I can downsize from my single family home, which we'll get to in a moment, move into a condo or a senior's residence and have access so that I don't have to drive. And that's a big thing for Brampton. It's a big thing for Mississauga, it's a big thing for the country. So, and remember this guy, that's what we're doing it for. The older people and the guy with the tattoos, and by 2025, 75% of the college graduates will have MBAs. How do they want to live? How do they want to get around? So, also important, it goes back to the age. What percent of your housing stock is single family houses? Well, Calgary, we're off the charts. As many people as we put downtown in the last 15 years, it's still very much a single family community, and our growth boundaries, we don't have them. We're growing out and out and out and trying to intensify. Brampton, same boat. Mississauga is actually, here's where Mississauga is doing really well. And why is this important? Because the turnover in single family homes as we get older has a real impact on your school system and your transit system. Because where I was living in Washington, D.C., 8 houses sold in my street in 5 years. Those houses didn't have kids in them for about 30 years. And then all of a sudden families moved in and the school board didn't know what to do with all the kids. Plus, the seniors moved out and they wanted to live in a place that was not a single family home where they could live in a condominium or assisted living, and the problem was we didn't have enough of that. And that's a challenge here as well. But the Huron-Ontario corridor offers a real potential with transit to offer an alternative to all the people living in the single family homes if they so choose. And what does that mean? So in Calgary, we've worked out by 2030 what kind of change we need in our housing stock in the downtown area. We need a lot less single family homes. We need more grade-related townhouse units and more apartments, condo-type buildings. And that increases as you move away from the downtown area, particularly as you saw with all the single-family houses in Brampton. And so what do we see? Apartments. The percent of your housing stock with apartments over 5 stories. Mississauga is doing pretty darn good. Of course, Toronto and Vancouver are a different story, right? But Mississauga is doing very well. Calgary's not. Although right now we have a surplus, but our population is going back up again. We were growing by 40,000 a few years ago and then fell off the cliff when the oil boom hit, or crashed. Brampton definitely needs more. And when you look at the ownership pattern in the homes, this is reflective of the single families again. But this Mississauga number, 72% of the people own their own homes, that's really quite good. But a lot of those people will be looking to sell those places and downsize. Oh yeah, very important. Multi-generational households, which you see a lot of in Brampton. And you have greater household sizes. And we heard in the introduction, where did he go? That he doesn't take the train to square one, but the kids do. And so when you're looking at the multi-generational households, you've got to provide transit to the number of people in that household to get to where they want to go. So, got a couple of things here in stats. Now I want to talk about some examples of where they've done this. And we'll go to Portland to start. In Portland, after they put in the train, within 2 to 3 years, They had a 35% increase in the commercial development. They had a 41% increase in the residential development. And the condo prices went through the roof. But only within a certain distance of the transit. The farther you got away from the transit, the prices stabilized. And they didn't seem the same increase, but they were still within walking distance. And then you also look at, we got 2,000 new units in 2015 with an affordable housing component. They're expecting 6,000 units. And last year the ridership was going through the roof. They got a 10% increase and went up to 16,000 riders. And their headways aren't that fast. So all along the street, they're seeing the kind of development that I think you might want to see along here in Ontario. And that was a direct result of the train. Now, they were very focused on how they did the construction. And in Portland, they only did it 2 blocks at a time so that they could keep the roads and access to the stores open. Very, very important. In Portland, they're looking at how many new businesses came in, off the charts. Those increases, the actual numbers, 860 new businesses fronting on the streetcar, 40 new coffee shops. How many do you need? Apparently a lot. 123 new restaurants, 207 new retail stores, in addition to the businesses that were already there. Now, DART is Dallas Area Rapid Transit. Very comparable situation to what we have here, because they were extending rapid transit into the suburbs. And that's where it really made a difference in Dallas, because they started focusing on the stops, or started focusing on the transit stops, and things boomed. All kind of property values went up, generated a huge increase in property tax. They did the expenditures about the economic impact and wages and things like that, and it's been a huge boom for the Dallas area. This is a picture in Toronto, out my window. This is the new public library in Calgary. There's the light rail coming in, it goes like this. All the trains meet just beside City Hall, and the area is just booming around it. Everybody wants to be near the train. And in fact, just over here is a condominium with 167 units with no car parking. 0. You walk into the basement and there's a massive bike parking garage. And you get 2 spots, one on the bottom, you pull out a rack on the top, put your bike in and lock it up, and you get a bike when you buy the condo. When it went on sale, all of the units sold out in a weekend except, I think, 10. But it works because it's right where the train is. And plus, when you're looking at affordability, now you're not paying. Calgary's the most expensive in Canada for concrete, by the way. We're about 15 to 25% more expensive than Toronto. So our underground spaces are about $55,000 a spot. So by not providing the garage, you've just lowered the price of the units dramatically. Hey, there's sound. Kansas City just finished it about 1.5 years ago, and this is a really interesting study about what they did. They used to have the streetcars, they took them out. Now they want to have an extended, it's been so excessive. Their short loop, it's only a couple miles long, they've already realized it's done $1.8 billion in economic activity. There's 40 new projects along there, and their sales tax receipts have gone up 58%. I'm Canadian, but I worked in the States for 10 years. As a little aside, we need to have this conversation in Canada. Because when you establish a half-cent sales tax for a special purpose in the States, you generate a lot of revenue. And so what they spent a lot of time doing was looking at informing everybody during the construction. And so in Kansas City, they kept 1 lane of traffic open the whole time. They built pedestrian bridges across the construction so people could get from one side of the street to the other to patronize the businesses. They put their deeps and shallow utility coordination in really fast, so there was minimal disruption. They have someone you can call 24 hours a day during the construction if you have an issue. And they had a whole parking strategy about how they could make sure people could still park at the businesses if they wanted to get there. So, what you can't see there, it says 0 businesses were lost during the construction period. Nobody lost their business. They had constant door-to-door engagement. You could pick up your phone and find out what was happening at any point. What was coming next, what they were planning, when they were having meetings, etc. Constant lunch and learns, and they tested the system overnight, so it didn't disrupt. They had events, constant events, parties, the first station opened up, this milestone. They had street parties, they had monthly points awards where people could get points for shopping at local businesses. And they had a big event on the first Friday of every month, where they just invited the whole city to come down into the business community and see what was going on. and critical and so good about what you're doing here in Ontario is when you drive here in Ontario, just like in Kansas City, you look at the things that you're connecting and the things that you're going past. Those major east-west roads are real barriers to people crossing. I mean, would you want to be walking across there today, right? The transit system gets you across those barriers and opens up new opportunities for businesses to get more customers. They did a small business survey after the station opened to find out how did businesses fare during the construction and what was the impact. And they found out, did you feel prepared? High number felt prepared because they were informed. They had a lot of consulting going on about how you could contend with this, how you operate your business during the construction period. Does the growth in the downtown business over the past year, is it noticeable? 41%, 22% were moderate or absolutely yes, I noticed an impact, a high impact. Slightly lower at 34%, but basically nobody said they lost business. And that's why 0 businesses went bankrupt during the construction, and now they're seeing more business. Have you seen a change in revenue? 15% said yes, 16 to 30% in this category now. They do see a difference. People are coming down. Have you seen a change in foot traffic? Yes. Everybody has seen it. When I would go home to the beaches in Toronto, where I lived for 21 years, I stopped taking the subway. I'd take the streetcar. If I wanted to go grocery shopping or pick up food, I'd just get off the train. Now, that I just understand, I heard from Brad this morning that like most transit systems, the TTC is going to allow you to do that and not have to pay to get back on if you do it within a certain period of time. That's a big boom for businesses, because now you can get off, get the milk, go get some prepared food, jump back on within a certain period of time, you don't have to pay again. That's really positive for business. What time of day do you see the most customers? Everybody's lunch hours. People are actually taking the train to go have lunch. What is your busiest day of the week? I talked about this at the start. It's Saturday. And when you think about driving to the mall on Saturday versus taking transit, if you can get there and it's convenient, people will do it. What operational changes have you made? Most people have added new staff to their businesses to deal with the uptick that the streetcar has created. And this is unfortunately, you won't hear it, but it was a survey where they actually interview all of the businesses along the street, or many of them, to talk about what they've experienced, and it's very positive. It's so positive, they're now trying to float bonds to extend it. Now, I'm going to change topics a little bit, and I want you to think about this. A former federal member of parliament here, etc. This is something you as a community should start thinking about, and it's an election, right? Good time to have it, and it's about value capture. And I can tell you that in the United States, when you build a transit line, and so this is Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a square. This is Maryland, over on this side. I worked in here. And the Red Line subway came down and went into my 2 legs of it, came in. And I've been working to join a 16-mile corridor for a new, what's called Purple Line streetcar. And one of the ways you look at paying for this is you say, okay, if I build that train, and pretend that's here in Ontario, how much revenue will I generate by people investing in new businesses on either side of the corridor? In this case, half a mile. And can I capture that increase? Now, in the States, value capture, you can capture all kinds of stuff, as I'll show you in a moment. But here's that example. What intersection is this on here in Ontario? I forgot. We drove by it this morning.
Courtney Park?
Courtney Park. And you look at Courtney Park. You put the train in tomorrow, and then all of a sudden, whoever built that decides to do it over here. If you look at what that property is paying in property tax today, it's a lot less than what they'll be paying when they build that building. Value capture says you capture that increase in that area, and can you use that money to invest in your community where you've done the change, to build new infrastructure, to build affordable housing, etc. And I'll show you the difference it makes. So you've got these stations, and that's what they look like today. I can tell you that in the States, pretend that's there, I could capture land transfer fees. You pay a land transfer fee in Ontario, I believe, right? When I sold my house in Washington, D.C., I paid $17,500 on a house that was worth $600. We could capture that. We could capture building permit fees. impact fees, development application fees, and other things in the States that you can't do here, but you have these tools here. You have those fees, and you could capture them. In fact, we worked out that the Missouri government share of the tax increment in different scenarios of charging them, we charge, and we do this here in Ontario and Canada. You have a special assessment revenue of, in this case, in scenario D, we would charge 5 cents for every $100 of valuation of property tax. Commercial as well, and we do this in, certainly did this in Toronto, I assume you do it in Mississauga. For every unit that gets built, you pay a fee. If you start getting all those fees, we worked out that where we were working in the States on that one line, it would generate $100 million a year. And that was more than enough to pay for the operating and help subsidize the cost of the bonds to build it. So when we start thinking about changes in policy in Canada, we have to start having these conversations about allowing municipalities who are investing in these things and accepting these density targets to collect some of the revenue that's generated to help pay for the things that the community needs. Now, a little hard to see from back there, but it's very important to remember average tax yield by property tax. You get your property tax that says your house is worth $600,000. You actually pay $3,000. But the valuation is $600,000. That's what this is about. And when you look at the different types of land uses, downtown office buildings are off the charts because they're valued way higher. Farmland, not so much. Single family houses, not so much. It's retail, office, multifamily high-rise, and mixed uses and downtown offices. That's what pays the big bucks. So when you start to get this new development along the corridor, you're looking at those increases in tax revenues, you should be having a dialogue about what you want to do with that money. So for example, in many communities they use it for affordable housing, they use it for business stabilization for both new and don't forget the existing businesses, which I'm sure why many of you are here, and new infrastructure to enable people to get to those businesses. Now I'll give you an example, and this is in Washington, D.C. This is the new streetcar on H Street. Now some people may be concerned about gentrification, about the displacement of existing businesses. I can tell you that where this is done, it's really site-specific. In the case of H Street, which is a very busy place now where they put the train, yes, they've got some new construction, but it brought the first full-service grocery store in the community in decades. So there was a positive. And it's brought enough traffic in that in the lower, smaller business area, the businesses are seeing an increase in their business. It's very, very important. Now, remember that here Ontario is not Queen Street West. When I was the planner for downtown Toronto for 21 years, the changes I saw in Queen Street West were dramatic. And it happened because Club Monaco, do you remember Club Monaco? They don't exist anymore, right? Club Monaco built a new building next to the used bookstore by the Atlas Machinery Tool Company, which is still there actually. Used to get my rudder bits there. Club Monaco built their new building and the place just took off. And there was retail upscaling. Businesses moved. You're not Queen Street West. The wonderful thing about here Ontario is there is a lot of land. And what you'll see is a strengthening of the existing businesses and the ability, given the size of the lots, as I'll show you in a moment, to do new construction while keeping the old businesses. This is in Maryland, where I work. There's a subway stop right there. And it's one of the highest retailing areas in the country per square foot. And this is a 6-lane road that makes here Ontario look like a Sunday drive. It's a busy place. Going back to what I said about changing the land use regulations, we changed all the land use regulations down here, and all these high-end shopping malls are now tearing themselves down around the edges and building in the parking lots and maintaining the uses behind them and putting the parking in the buildings that they're building. So the new businesses are staying and they're maximizing all the vacant land. Just as a side note, that's Lord & Taylor. The people who own the mall own the Washington Nationals baseball team. Lord & Taylor, it's Lord & Taylor, is suing the mall owner for $2 billion because they've taken down most of the mall and they're saying, you're ruining our brand. So there's little asides. But the beautiful part, and this could be here Ontario Street, is you have all this land to develop while still maintaining a revenue base with your existing businesses. And that's critical. And so what's happening along that corridor, and here's an example, that's what's happening. It's being built today. And we created a special taxing district. We're using the money from that special taxing district for the levies and impact fees for the development to pay for the infrastructure that's needed in the area to build a new downtown. Now, some of you may have asked, and I don't know if this debate's come up, about the impact of transit and what will Lyft and Uber do and autonomous vehicles to transit. Certainly there's a number of cities in the United States that have experienced a transit use reduction in the last 2 years, largely a function of the price of gas. And you're still going to need ride sharing, you're still going to need parking spaces, and you're still going to need transit. And the cities that will succeed in the future are the ones that have the transit. So, that said, as I conclude, I'll play this video. Kansas City did it right. This is a rapper who does a rapper video on the Kansas City streetcar. And if you ever want to, you should hear this guy, it's fantastic. You can go on YouTube and hit KC Rap. It actually looks like K crap, but it's KC Rap. And these guys are not workers, they're gonna start dancing in a minute. But there's plenty of examples. And you can create a Mississauga-Brampton solution. You're not Toronto, you're not Calgary, you're not Vancouver, and that's a good thing. It's actually a really good thing. You have a blank slate with a lot of people vested in their businesses and in their homes, who I'm sure that you can work with to really make this succeed. And in my drive this morning, I wasn't sure if I should say, I guarantee you that we'll come back here in 25 years and you're actually going to see it extended, because people will see the value of it. And I'm really excited for you. I just think that you have an opportunity here that's going to be unbelievable. So thank you very much.